Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be tuning in from. Welcome to episode 49 of Veeam Industry Insights. Good morning, Jason. How are you?
I'm doing well, my friend. How about yourself?
Very, very good. Very good. We've got actually a new member of the production team that we'd like to welcome in, not far from where you live, Jason. And that's probably a good reminder right off the bat. Please do give a shout out where you're tuning in from in our LinkedIn comments. We've got two of the production team in Texas. I'm in Colorado. Our producers in Georgia. Love to see where everyone else is tuning in from, and feel free to throw that in even after the live stream concludes. We'll come back to this a couple different times, but I should also mention any questions, any comments that you may have as well, feel free to throw that into the comments. We have people that actually shoot that over to us, so if you see us looking off to the screen, that's what we might be getting is an update from one of the production folks. So without further ado, we are now going to embark, Jason, on a 3-Monday mid-size enterprise or SMB activity. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so if you've been following our insights for the last year and a half-ish now, 16 months worth of doing this, a lot of the data that we do is specifically around commercial size organizations, meaning users between 250 up to 999. Or enterprises, meaning organizations with over 1,000 employees. And we really wanted to kind of expand that and kind of double click down a little bit. So we just finished, the research panel company gave us 400 responses from what we call small and mid-sized businesses. So organizations between 50 and 249 employees. So really just trying to understand a little bit lower market, what's going on, what's the same as everywhere else, what's different. This particular survey, 400, two of them were in North America, 200 of them were in 4 European countries, just to kind of really look at not only the space, but also both sides of the pond and see what's going on there. So super excited about this. Charts we just started coming out with over the weekend. The report will come out sometime over the summer.
Yeah, awesome stuff. And, it's interesting, Jason, we are now 6 different research projects that either just concluded or are just at some point of being in flight to concluding. Is that right?
Yeah, it's amazing how much research you can do when you're not flying 250,000 air miles per year. So it has been a chance to kind of really double down and look at where's the market going, right? And making sure that our products, that our enablement, our forward vision all aligns with and really trying to be in front of where customers are trying to go, so that we make sure that we have products before they get where they're headed. It's been a really exciting time, and of course, it's been great to have these Mondays with you along the way.
Yeah, no, likewise, and we should give a shout out to our colleague Julie Webb, who's done a masterful part. She's the adult in the room of the three-legged stool that is the research effort here at Veeam. So without further ado, let's look a little bit about the self-reported challenges that the midsize enterprise is coming back with, according to this data.
Yeah, so as always, whenever you see 2 charts like this or 2 bars, the darker true Veeam green, if you will, is organizations could ask any number of challenges that they are concerned about for the next upcoming 12 months. And then in that bright yellowish green is when someone can only choose one. What's the one they're concerned is being most impactful to their org? I wasn't surprised that cyber made the top of both lists. I was surprised at how disproportionate it was.
Mm-hmm.
When organizations could choose, nearly double cyber as their most impactful compared to the next one, and the next one was economic uncertainty, right? So we're not through COVID yet, right? We're not through that pandemic. The economies are not yet up to speed, so we would expect that economic uncertainty would be up there. And then I think if you start working your way down that list, outage of public cloud resources. This one's really interesting because, as you'll see, mid-sized businesses actually have reported as being even more progressive towards the cloud, even more than our commercial and enterprise research has shown otherwise. And so for them to say, as their number 3 challenge, they're concerned about what would be most impactful in public cloud actually confirms that, right? Because you put all your eggs in the basket, that basket breaks. The technical term is your host. it's a bad day to be you. So interesting that cyber is there, which doesn't absolve itself when you go to cloud.
Right.
Economic uncertainty from a global events perspective, and then public cloud, because they're now relying on that. That's your top three.
Yeah, and if I take the sort of the opposite view, meaning, okay, what's not the top three? It's interesting to me that the top three most impactful items are external to the corporation.
Yes.
You
Yeah,
know,
all of them are things that, you're just trying to adapt and stay up with.
right.
I do think it's interesting, though. So look at the dark green lines for a second. Again, cyber's top of mind, but look at the number 2 and the number 3 of most concerned about in frequency. And that is outage of server and storage hardware, and then outage of infrastructure and networking. Dave, you and I have talked a lot about how a lot of organizations, especially over these last 16 months, locked down, right? Yeah. They weren't investing in new hardware. They couldn't get new hardware if they wanted it. And most of the time, they couldn't pay for it if they did, right? And so now hardware that might have been on a 3-year life cycle is well into year 4, coming into year 5. And I mean, they're just trying to eke that last bit of life out of it. And I'm here to tell you, what that data shows me is they're concerned that stuff has gone past its prime, and they're still relying on it. And that is the causality of so many outages that we've seen over the years.
Yeah, it's an interesting distribution, from external to internal. Your points are very good about we've sweated the assets or the investment life cycle from an asset management perspective, hung on to gear longer. But the funny one in my mind is the down below, the last couple, the administrator, yeah, that could be impactful, but it's not really that much of a concern because I'm the administrator answering this question. I'm a lot more worried about the gear around me and everything outside of the data center having an impact. But I would be remiss, Jason, and everyone, if I didn't harken back to basically a slide similar to this in our overall data protection report,
sure,
which is, why is backup still interesting in 2021? Well, unfortunately, a slide like this helps to illustrate a lot of things can still go wrong. And hopefully you won't experience too many of these, but the threat potential is certainly there. And obviously the threat potential for something that's outside of your own data center is really there in a fairly pronounced fashion. So I am actually being told we have got an update on over a dozen countries that have come through on our world map. Wow. And
there you go.
Awesome. Right. Canada or one of these large geographies show up. One day we're going to have to go ask someone from Greenland if they wouldn't mind tuning in just to light that up. But boy, we have got Canada. We've got now also South America that's shown up here. We've got Sweden, France, Dubai, Belgium, Argentina that we see listed there. I love
when Argentina weighs in.
Czech Republic, Netherlands, Portugal, France.
Our way. Always count on my friends in South Africa to chime in. Very, very good.
Yeah, I think if I'm not mistaken, that gives us about 13 countries. We've also added Ohio, Indiana, Tennessee from the U.S. states. I think we've got a couple others maybe. Nice. Well, please keep giving shout out where you're tuning in from and any commentary that you may have. Egypt as well has just come in. Thank you very much for that. If we go now to our second graphic, this literally is the money slide, isn't it, Jason?
Yeah. Yeah, so I love the fact on the first slide, right? So on that first slide, we saw that there was a real break between certainly cyber is top of mind for everybody, right? And the way you solve for cyber is both proactive and reactive. Proactive on detection and prevention, and then reactive, making sure that, the odds are not in your favor. It is a matter of when, not if, for most organizations to get hit. I think one of the things that's interesting, and probably why cyber is so big for SMB, is because if you're talking to an enterprise, if something goes bad, they've got Clark Kent, right? They've got Bruce Wayne. They got somebody who's ready to throw on that superhero cape and jump into action and solve the problem. Mid-sized businesses don't. right? They're lucky if they have the Boy Wonder. They probably have more like Jimmy Olsen. And if you're not a comic book nerd, now you know I am, right? So with all that in mind, what they do know is, okay, if we don't have experts on staff, we better be backing this stuff up. And I was actually really impressed to see not only is there a global push on incrementing investment in data protection as we come into the second half of 21 into 22, but so nearly 6% expected budget increase in the U.S., almost 5% for the EMEA respondents. Now, but look at that U.S. shift, right? Look on that left-hand side, 18% of the U.S. respondents in that yellow green on that far left, 18%. So what is that? 1 in 6-ish said they're going to increase their data protection by budget by at least 10% year over year. Now, I don't know if that's entirely because they are so scared of cyber or if because they had locked down their budget to nothing last year and they're just trying to catch up. But either way, that's a boon for putting in new innovation and technologies there. I also think that a big reason for that is we are seeing that shift in cloud, right? So as you are moving off of those legacy physical and legacy virtual that you probably had some kind of legacy backup for, as you are moving your workloads into cloud, whenever you modernize production, got to modernize protection. It's not free. So I think that's where you're seeing that investment is as organizations are embracing cloud, they realize they're going to have to invest in new data protection tools to go with it.
Yeah, I find this very interesting because I spent a lot of time looking at the numbers and forecasts and it's predominantly Gartner and IDC that are the two numbers houses as it relates to at least our space. And both firms firmly felt that COVID-19 was going to have a dramatic impact on data protection or backup recovery spending in 2020. Short story, it did not. If I just look at what Gartner believed or projected, end of March, they thought backup recovery last year might be plus 4.5%. 1 month later, end of April of last year, they said, no, wait a minute. Now that we look at the impact of the virus, it might actually be negative 16%. So a 21-point swing that wiped out $1.8 billion of revenue associated with backup software. No hardware dependency there. IDC was a little more relaxed, but basically the net of it is every firm that analyzes this space was surprised at how resilient backup recovery software was in a tough year of 2020. Also surprised at IDC has a PBBA, purpose-built backup appliance, think data domain is but one example. They were surprised how resilient that market was. And then now, Jason, you would think, boy, SMBs might have been more gun shy than even larger enterprise. But yet here we see people reporting data like this, that not only is it looking very positive, to your point, as you go over on the left-hand side, it looks like people are thinking of, I will call it fairly significant refactoring of their environment or their data protection practice. That's how I read it.
Yeah, and again, I think there's kind of two things to take away. For some organizations, they were completely locked down. They froze all budgets, especially in mid-sized organizations. And so they have a pent-up demand. Some of this, they're buying the data protection they would have liked to have bought last year, and only now they can, right? But in other organizations, I do think that one of the things the pandemic showed us is the universal dependency on data, right? Doesn't matter what kind of job you had. For the last 16 months, you had to figure out, how do I keep doing my job when I'm now remote? Our dependency on data and the visibility of that. And somewhere along the way, everyone said, when we thought about BCDR, we thought about floods, we thought about hurricanes, we thought about fire, we thought about errant bad guys, right? We never thought about, we will have to re-architect our entire way of life. Right. And so there's a lot of organizations that have said we have to reimagine that. And whenever you reimagine that, you have to double up investment. And so really interesting that even down in mid-sized organizations, people understanding when you modernize production, you got to modernize protection. And if your data matters to you, you got to back it up. Right. Those universal truths probably have really been pounded home for a lot of folks of all sizes.
Yeah. I mean, digital transformation depends on digital, right? It depends on data. But what I think is interesting, if we go to the next slide,
Mhm.
a lot of people are using a whole variety of different solutions, some of which may be no cost. Take us through this one, because I mean, this is basically an interesting mix. It means there's not one dominant player. You and I can remember, I'll call it maybe 15 to maybe closer to 20 years ago.
Yeah.
There were one, maybe two providers. If you said, what are you using for mid-size enterprise backup, you expected to hear, I'll just go ahead and name them, probably Backup Exec and or ArcServe would have been the two that would have come up the most back in the day. Now we see results that are really distributed in a variety of different ways.
Yeah, and one of the things that we see here now, this is the 4 modes of data protection that are kind of ongoing. We also, even in the sample, we did include it in the chart, where things like we're also evaluating other technologies that are either time bombed or minimal, et cetera. But one thing to note here is notice that these numbers on either side of the pond. So the U.S. folks are in the yellowy green, the EMEA folks are in, or the European folks are in the darker green. Don't add up to 100%. Right. So right away, you can see that folks are using more than one kind of data protection method. Right. I think it's really interesting and probably really validating that in the mid-sized organization space, nearly half of mid-sized organizations are leveraging a cloud-based data protection solution.
Yeah.
Right. They're trying to get out of, how many blinky light boxes can I minimize in my environment? And they like the OpEx versus CapEx. They like the fact that usually backup as a service comes with expertise, right? For all those reasons, I think it's the right choice for mid-sized orgs to be using a cloud-based provider. I also think it's interesting that on both sides of the pond, most folks agree with a couple of variations. Turns out that perpetual licensing, so that traditional backup and hardware software solution on-prem, more common in U.S. mid-sized organizations than in Europeans by, 12 points. But other than that, pretty much everybody agrees that let's split the difference on these. So 45, 49. So 47, nearly half are running in the cloud. 34% are using a community or a freemium product. I'm hoping they're all using, Veeam's community edition product. That'd be fantastic. That'd be 34% of the market. And then as we see, split the difference there. So early 30s are using a standard solution. And then I'm surprised by in the mid-sized organizations at 18 to 24, so call it 21, 1 in 5 organizations are using a backup that just it came with their Synology box. It came with their Drobo. It came with their NAS. Some kind of it came with, and it's good enough, right? Now, when we publish this data, we will cut that by size. I'm really hoping that's the 50-person orgs and not the 249-person orgs that are using a good enough that probably isn't, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, that's interesting. And we should give a shout out. Usually we try to keep this, more industry oriented than Veeam specific. But in this case, I think it's worth mentioning Veeam does have a community edition.
Absolutely.
It is perpetually or forever no charge, which is meaning free. You can run a number of different instances on that, 10 different server machines. I think we're now up to 20 laptops that are licensed in that. So there's a lot of value there, as well as I know we're over 1 million downloads of our Windows agent. I happen to use it as well.
Me too.
So it's something if you're one of those organizations, or to Jason's point, if you're an organization that was using maybe a piece of software that came with a piece of infrastructure that you purchased many years ago, you might owe it to yourself to go check out other solutions, and just would mention Veeam has free solutions as well.
Yeah, and in fact, I would probably take that one step further. I'm going to put on my sales hat for just a second, right? So if you bought, I happen to have in my demo lab, I've got a little 5-drive little Drobo unit. It has about 20 terabytes of storage in there, and it came with a little backup product once upon a time, right? So certainly you can download the Veeam Community Edition totally free, and I can use that same storage now as my Veeam repository of choice. And in fact, my son and daughter, they back up their Windows and their Mac devices straight back to that same little NAS, little Soho box sitting in my office. So certainly I have empathy for all those folks that are using the community editions, but use a real community edition product. Go pull down Veeams. All right, so we've talked a lot about where things are going and that drive towards that. I do think, though, and this is probably my favorite new piece of insight from the research. Do we want to check the map before we dig in this? Because this last one, it's cool. We should look at this in some detail.
Yeah, let's do a quick hit on the map. I see we've got UK.
There you go. LATAM in the house.
Got a lot more Latin America thanks to Brazil. We've got Iran, Mexico. I think we already mentioned India, and we've got Germany that's come in. So thank you very much for all of that coverage. And we should also mention the United States. We picked up another state, Missouri. So awesome on that.
Always good when Missouri is looking at backup. They are the show me state after all. They're hard.
I was thinking that same thing. Thank you, Missouri.
I will be in Missouri for part of my summer break at a Boy Scout camp. So thank you for chiming in wherever you are, hopefully in Osceola. All right. So let's look at this last piece of data. And I think this one's super interesting. So it's a variation of one of the same questions that we ask in our Mammoth Data Protection Research Report from 2021, looking at the distribution of servers between physical servers on the left, virtual machines in the middle, and then cloud-hosted workloads, including both hyperscale and regional service providers. And what we ask, and every time we ask this, is, estimate the percentage of servers that across each of the three workloads. That's in the yellowy green, and then, or platform, excuse me. And then what do you think it's going to be in 2 years? And that's kind of that Veeam green over there. And what I think is really interesting here, Dave, is asking about a 2-year split. Not that different.
No, it really was not at all, which is a little surprising. But here's an interesting data point for you that might help explain that. My past life, when I was at Gartner, and there's still a great analyst there that leads their mid-size enterprise practice. He always used to say, large enterprises, everyone thinks that they have more resources, greater advantage, etc. However, the mid-size enterprise, or SMB, they have the ability to be more nimble. Right. There is sort of like the speedboat versus the aircraft carrier. They can do different things. Well, it could be, Jason, that what we're seeing here in these results is that the mid-size organizations, they're already further along in making this shift than someone that might be weighed down with past investments of significant dollar amounts, where they are not yet able to hit these kinds of percentages. And therefore, their 2-year outlook in large enterprise might look very different. But to your point, this is, pretty consistent, really.
Dave, I think your interpretation is exactly spot on. I think that's exactly what you're seeing is that nimbleness of mid-sized organizations to say, look, they've known for a while they want to get out of the business of IT. They've known for a while that backup as a service and cloud-hosted infrastructure are mature enough, and they don't have 1,000 servers to move across. Right. Which means when they decide they're going to do something, that could be a tough weekend for some VAR or MSP. But after that weekend, they're done. Right. They're on that curve. And I think that actually shows true not only here. And I cut my teeth. I was a channel VAR SE as my first gig when I first got out of college. And, again, you put that weekend in and you can make some radical change in a 2 or 3 day holiday. Let's look at the last one, because I think that puts it back into context. This last one, I took the green bars, the light green, the dark green. That's what we looked at before. That's the SMBs in 2021 current. And then also the dark green, what they're going to do in 2 years. What I did was we overlaid on top of that from the data protection research report that we had from earlier this year, what commercial and enterprise were doing along that same line. So what you see in we'll use the physical servers, that left cluster. 2020, commercial and enterprise had about 38% of their servers were physical, down to 29 in that light blue percent. And then they expect between 2021 and 2023 to go all the way to that dark teal, I think is the right term for that, get you at 24%. So they're still on that declination curve. Right. SMB is already further down that curve than they are, so there's less for them to do. Now, virtualization tells a little bit of a different story. We know that no matter how much people think virtualization was going to stay flat, and we see that every year, and when we do the survey, that COVID and digital transformation accelerated with cloud, so everything stepped down, and that's what we see, 30 down to 23, and then pretty much flat, 23s and 24s all the way through. And then here's the fun part, take a look at that right-hand side, right? So commercial and enterprise, they thought they were at 32% cloud hosted in 2020, 47% cloud hosted in 21. Mid-sized businesses are already at 50 and they're moving to 54. Right? Mm-hmm. Everybody is breaking that 50% cloud market. Now, this does not say, we always want to remind folks that the data center is dead. That's not what it says. What it says is that as folks are embracing a cloud-first approach, if you're mid-sized, you probably might be cloud only. But overall, as you embrace cloud first, it's going to dilute whatever percentage of servers you're still running on-prem as you go more and more cloudy for all new workloads. But as this happens, remember, my catchphrase, whenever you modernize production, you got to modernize protection that goes along with that. And this shows one more reason why mid-sized organizations have been making increased investment and plan to continue investing in data protection for the next 12 months.
Yeah, I like this slide. It's a lot to parse, but you explained it well. And in that C and E is commercial, enterprise. Commercial is, think of that roughly as the mid-sized enterprise. But, if we look at this, I think it's really interesting. I like your phrase especially. Doesn't mean the data center is going away, or at least not for all organizations. If you're in a two-person organization starting out today, all SaaS-based model might make perfect sense. If you are even a smaller enterprise, but you've been in business for some period of time, you've made capital expenses and investments in other areas, there's absolutely nothing wrong with hanging on to the gear that is working well for you. Just always like to say, though, don't be wedded to past decisions. Understand if that's really the best choice now, that you might have other possibilities as well. And if that investment data indeed is accurate, you might have the funding to go make other kinds of choices.
That's
As
right.
we begin to wrap up, we do want to give a shout out. I'll let you take this first one, Jason. Tell us a little bit about veeAMON.
So excited about this. So this is the second year that veeAMON has been delivered virtually. It's free, it's online. veeAMON is always fantastic. I mean, Dave, you and I went to our first veeAMONs back when we were still in the analyst community, and we just kept on going when we're here. Huge amount of idea sharing, really optimized for that technical decision maker, that technical implementer, real world. This is what's going on. Yep. This is how to make your world better. You and I each have some sessions. We know our boss, our CTO, is leading the fray and on some of the vision stuff as well. Lots of cool stuff, including some news. So you're going to want to make sure to register for that. And I want to say, like, you got 2 more days to register and still get your swag-ish. There was a swag kit if you pre-register by a certain point. So if you haven't yet, please make sure to register today. Why are you waiting? It's the best 2 days you're going to spend online. Come on.
Yeah, and in anticipation of that, one of the cool things you can see this Friday, and speaking of demos and various kinds of new things, you can tune in for Melissa Palmer and Rick Vanover this Friday, same time as this broadcast. They're going to be going over 7 things that you did not know about Veeam Disaster Recovery Orchestrator. That is our orchestration automation engine. Actually, it does a lot of things, and they're going to have some great tips for you. I'd be remiss also, Jason, our good friends in Caston are very, very busy this week with KubeCon, and I want to make sure I get it right, the Cloud Native Data Management Day that's co-resident essentially with KubeCon. A lot of great stuff happening there. If you're a newbie to Kubernetes and that sort of, shift left kind of mentality, encourage you to check that out. Let's hit the map one last time before we bag out, because I am told we've got a new country, meaning new country that we've not seen on our map beforehand, which we have Nigeria, which, believe it or not, we have had a few times. Thank you if you're a returning visitor viewer from Nigeria. We did add the states of Michigan and New Jersey, but we also have added Mauritania, and I hope I pronounced that properly. Jason, could you pick Mauritania out on a map?
Texas education precludes me from knowing where Mauritania is. So thank you for whoever colored it green for us. We're so excited to have you. Thanks for joining in and teaching us a new word today. So that's awesome.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We'll be double-clicking or deep diving in further depth on the SMB research that we've just begun presenting to you. As always, stay safe, stay positive, and we look forward to seeing you on the next live stream. Thanks so much.
Bye now.